Okay, so I was going to put out a different video today, but I didn't get around to recording it. So I figured I would go through and discuss how I liked using these four-frame mating nukes, whatever you want to call them. And I built these last winter and used them this year, and it was probably one of the best things that I've done. Very useful. And I made a video kind of, when I was putting these together, but I hadn't used them yet. Now I have. So I did make one change to the lids. I was just using a regular, flat lid, but I've since come back and added this lip around here, which makes it easier to put the lid on without squishing bees. You can also, put some sugar bricks in there, or a pollen patty if you need that in your area. It's just all around better. This was the old style lid here. As you can see, it's just flat. It would go just right on the box. Nothing wrong with that per se, but there are advantages to having these on here. For one, the lids won't warp as bad depending on the quality of your plywood. This is a pretty good piece of plywood here that I think was off of like the side of a cabinet or something. But I went ahead when I figured out I needed lips on these things, and just when I had the table saw out, I just made a bunch of these pieces and had them in the shop for when these became available. When I moved some bees up to a full-size box or whatever, then I could come in and just insert these, nail them on, throw some spray paint on the side, and have them ready to go in case I found some queen cells or whatever I needed to do. So that's that. That's the only kind of thing that I've changed on them from when I built them. I'll show you this. Here's another lid with a spider. Another lid with a hole in the top in case you want to feed with a jar. I kind of like the frame feeders better if I'm taking them to a designated nuke yard. If they're in like a yard with bigger colonies, then I think it's better to put some sugar bricks on top of the frames. But this is an option if you wanted to do it that way. So I've got a list of 5 things that I like about using this size nuke box, and particularly one constructed like I've constructed this one. The first thing that I've got on my list, and I'll show you my list here. That's not what I want to show you actually. What I wanted to show you is this inspection form, and I've just kind of created this on Excel. But the point that I wanted to bring up, and I just thought about this as I was making my list on the back, is it's kind of obvious, but I'm going to say it anyway. If you use a form like this, you don't have to use every single slot. You can have this in your bee yard, maybe not even use it on most of your inspections, but if you come across something that you think might be relevant, you can just quickly jot down that information. And you can see I was doing some inspections. Looks like this was back in April, and I only recorded some information about how many frames of brood, whether there were eggs. I know how many boxes were here. I know the population basically, and the amount of drawn comb. That's all I was really concerned about recording at that time. In April, I'm not real concerned about their food stores. And now if I would have seen something alarming like just a bunch of empty comb and no food for them to raise brood in April, then obviously I would have jotted that down. But I think you get the idea. This can be a tool that's good. Obviously, I'm not going to go through and use it on every colony, but it's good to have around, and something to maybe think about. If you want a copy of this exact form, I can get that for you. But I'm sure they're all over the internet as well. I just typed this one up to kind of suit what I wanted to have on it, kind of borrowed from other ones that I've seen. Anyway, okay, number 1, these are very inexpensive for me to build. This is all scrap lumber, just cut-offs, pieces, that sort of thing. One thing maybe a little bit different about the way that I've built these compared to some that you've probably seen online is I've used different types of scrap for the sides versus the front and the back and the bottom. And the reason for that is the material that I've got on the side here, it does not have to be as high a quality as what you're resting your frames on in the bottom. So I've got fairly decent 3/4 inch lumber, you know, basically in the shape of a U here that the frames rest on, and the bottom adds a bunch of rigidity, and then the side is a thinner, lower quality material that's much easier to find in larger pieces. So for me to find a 3/4 inch piece of material that's deep enough and wide enough to use on a box like this, it just isn't going to happen. So what you end up having to do would be like joining multiple pieces together, spending a bunch of time. That's not really necessary for this particular type box because I'm using it in the time of year when the weather is not bad, and I'm only using it really for a short period of time to get a colony going in order for me to bump them up into a bigger box. You don't want, now, you know, you could use just a 4-frame nuke and have a bottom board and, you know, all this stuff, but when you're mating queens, you don't know whether that queen's going to come back or not. Okay, check. Sorry guys, the camera died, but we're back. So I think I was talking about quantity over quality for mating. So I'd much rather have 10 of these cost-effective 4-frame nukes than just a couple 5-frame nukes. And basically that's the advantage of using the scrap and building these myself, is for the same amount of cost or effort, however you want to, you know, balance that, I can get more of these compared to, you know, purchasing nucleus colonies from, you know, a company, for example, or building them myself. That would, you know, cost a lot more for me to even build a 5-frame nuke that's stackable and a higher quality compared to these, where the bottoms are all screwed on there and, you know, or stapled on there, glued on there. This is just more cost effective. I understand it may not be that way for everyone. If you don't have the, you know, ability to find scrap lumber, or maybe the tools or the, you know, the ability to put this together, then that may not be an option. But I think for a lot of people it is. A lot of beekeepers are, you know, kind of accustomed to kind of building their own stuff when need be, and I think this is a good option. Okay, advantage number 2 is the size. So we want our mating nukes to be small, but we don't want them to be too small, or I don't want them to be too small for my particular situation, because I have a full-time job. So if you're a queen breeder, you want to have as little resources as possible tied up into any one potential queen. But that can be a problem for someone like me, because I may not be able to get back around to check those queens in the right amount of time, and they can get hot or scone, swarm, you know, whatever. Whereas this is much more forgiving. The queen can go, come back, get mated, start laying, and I can just leave them in here. It also gives me the opportunity to evaluate the quality of the queen. So I'm not going to just pull her from this right away. Perhaps I'll leave her in here and see her laying pattern before she even gets moved on to another box. And most of the time they're just grown out in these, you know what I mean? I'll let them fill this thing out, get busting at the seams before I move them up anyway. So this is particularly advantageous for me raising queens for myself. Advantage number 3 is once I'm not, you know, making queens, I still have these boxes just kind of around, so that if I get into a colony and I find some queen cells and I think it's, you know, worth promoting those genetics for whatever reason, I can just grab that frame, you know, grab a frame of, you know, that has the cells on it, maybe grab a frame of food, plop it into one of these boxes, and just, you know, see if I get another queen. You can't really do that with a small mating nuke, because obviously the full-size frames won't fit. It's just so super easy. You just grab the frame, throw it in this, and you just come back, check it 3 or 4 weeks later, and see what you got. Advantage number 4 is, let's see, what do I have here? Oh, is the spacing that I've got in here. So I've built these a specific width. Two things I was trying to accomplish with this width. One is I've got extra space in here to insert frames that have queen cells on them. You know, sometimes the queen cells will be coming off the bottom, you know, sticking out here, and I want enough room to have all these frames in here and stick this in without damaging the queen cell. And that leads into advantage number 5, is this extra space allows me to have 3 frames and also fit a frame feeder. So let me grab that and I'll show you. This fits in there snug, and the reason that I've got it to where it fits in there snug like this is because when I'm making up colonies early in the season, making splits, I wanted the option to make the splits up, shut them up in here, and then move them to another yard so there wouldn't be a bunch of drift back to the original colony. And with this being tight, those frames won't bounce around during transportation. If you're moving a colony that's established, you know, it's not really that big of a deal because they've got propolis in there, everything's kind of glued together. But if I'm making up splits early in the season, I'll probably only have 2 frames that have, you know, that came from another colony, and then have an empty frame in this feeder. Well, everything's nice and stuck in there, and they're not going to bounce around and damage a bunch of bees in transportation. And I think I already showed you guys, I think that's basically all I've got to share on this. If you can think of anything that maybe I missed, or if you have any questions about this, let me know in the comment section below.